Gardener's Choice by Mark Alexander, read by Bill Oddie.
Yes, it was a very nice house. Old-fashioned, a bit rambling, would need quite a lot of DIY. Well, one thing he wasn't short of was time, but the garden, large and nicely secluded. A bit neglected, but he'd make it a picture, and Kitty would be just as keen. All her life she'd wanted to grow flowers, and considering everything, the price was right. In fact, remarkably good. We'll take it, young woman, Alfred Parsons announced, and the girl from the estate agency glanced quickly at Mrs. Parsons, who nodded. Not that she was one to let her husband make all the decisions like her old dad had done, far from it, but she and Alfred had been married for so long there was no need for a lot of words when they were in accord. The girl from the estate agency calculated her commission and smiled. They moved in as soon as possible, and when the removal van had gone, Alfred and Kitty stood on the big lawn surveying their house and the shrubs that surrounded it, their neglected flowerbed in the shade of a long brick wall, and the glory of the sun as it dipped below their trees. "Oh, to think of it," exclaimed Kitty. "A house of our own, after all those years in the flat." "Aye," agreed Alfred. "It'll be like starting all over again. I don't mind telling you, love, I felt right heartsick after I was given the shove at Proctor's. Early retirement, they called it. But it was a bloody shove, making way for a bloody computer, and me that's been in print all my life. But now I'll have the garden to take my mind off things. You know, I reckon I'll plant some vegetables." He became carried away with mental pictures of rows of green things standing to attention. He was a tall, easy-going man, and Kitty, who was short and plump, was equally easy-going. Perhaps that was why that, after years of married life, they'd had few real differences and were still happy with each other. "But first, I'll tidy up the paths," Alfred continued, "and cut back those shrubs before they take over." "And I'd like to put a flower bed right in the middle of the lawn," said Kitty. And that was how it all began. "Morning." Alfred looked up from his weeding to see that a bald head had appeared over the top of the brick wall. It reminded him of the cartoon that had been a favourite wartime piece of graffiti, and he remembered how his boyhood sense of humour had been tickled by the scrawled captions that always followed the word "what," such as "What? No bananas?" "Morning," Alfred returned, amusing himself with the thought that the head might reply, "What? No beer?" Instead it said, "Name's Hodge." "Oh, pleased to meet you. My name's Parsons, Alfred Parsons." "Oh, I'm an Alfred too. How are you finding your new home then?" "I must say the wife and I were glad to have neighbours at last. Place has been empty a good while." "Oh, we like it, especially the garden. Hope to get it right soon." "Aye," said Alfred Hodge, producing an old-fashioned pipe. "Been neglected it has." "Aye," agreed Alfred Parsons, hoping to learn something about the previous owner. He was not to be disappointed. The old man who used to live in your place was right particular about the garden, especially the lawn," said Alfred Hodge. "He used to wear spiked shoes so that when he mowed it, he aerated it at the same time. Give him his due, though. It were like green velvet. His name was Musgrove. Misery Musgrove, they called him. Ooh, standoffish old sod. He wouldn't chat to you over the wall or anything like that. Oh, no. A dog got into his garden once. It was sniffing round his precious lawn, so he shot it with an air rifle. It was hell to pay. And they reckon he used to put poison down for cats. He must have lived in that house for over 20 years. He had his wife with him when he first came. She was a lot younger than him. And I remember she wanted to have a flower bed in the middle of his precious lawn. Oh, the rows they had over that. You could hear 'em over the wall. Terrible. Then she scarpered. No one knew the details, but, I have a pretty good idea she took off with a boyfriend. I tell you, I don't blame her. And the kids made up stories that old Misery had strangled her and buried her in the garden. You know what kids are like. But I told them he wouldn't dig up his beloved lawn even to hide a body. When he was really old, he used to totter over that grass and keep it fertilised and mowed while the rest of the garden went to pot. I was so used to seeing him there, after he died, I used to imagine him leaning on his stick, looking at the lawn. I mean, he weren't no apparition or anything. It's just that, well, I'd seen him like that every day. "Alfred?" came a distant voice. You or me?" asked Alfred Parsons with a chuckle. "Yeah, you. Linda calls me Fred." "Well, see you again. Nice to be neighbourly." Alfred went inside for lunch, and the first thing Kitty said after she'd asked him if he'd washed his hands was, "When are you going to dig that flower bed?" Alfred and Kitty sat pleasantly in their sitting room, entertaining their next-door neighbours. Fred and Alfred argued the merits of a new biological lawn fertiliser, while Linda and Kitty were deep in the pros and cons of microwave cooking. When the time came to sit at the supper table, Fred said, "Well, I must say, Mrs. Parsons, Kitty, you've got this old place looking very nice. Very nice indeed. And I think," said Linda Hodge, not to be outdone, "that Alfred here has done wonders in the garden." "It'll be nice when it's finished," said Kitty meaningfully. "Oh, I thought it just about was," Fred said. "It will be when Alfred makes me a bed in the lawn, won't it, dear?" Said Alfred. "Oh, old Misery Musgrave would rotate in his grave if he knew," began Fred, but a glance from Linda silenced him, and she said, "Oh, look, Fred, what a pretty tablecloth. Kitty embroidered it herself, you know. Oh, so clever, I can't sew a button myself." "That's true," said Fred. After the guests had departed, Alfred turned to his wife. "Look, Kitty, love, I'd rather not have a bed in the lawn. It may sound funny, but I don't want to do it. It'd spoil the look of the lawn, and I'd just rather not." "Alfred Parsons, I never dreamt you could be mean." "Oh, Kitty, apart from nailing those shelves in the airing cupboard, I haven't asked anything else of you for days." "Oh, but love, it's all very well for you to call me love, but if you mean it, you'll dig me that flower bed. Now, come on, don't let's be silly over a little thing like that. You be a dear and do it for me, and everything will be all right. I'll plant tulips in it. Be ever so pretty. I've always longed for tulips." "Oh, goodness me, is that the time? Oh, come on, up the wooden hill. Look, we'll talk about what shape it should be in the morning." Kitty went to bed determined that Alfred would do as she wished. Alfred went to bed determined he wouldn't. Next morning, Alfred viciously attacked deep-rooted weeds with a trowel, taking his annoyance out on Doc and Dandelion. "Why all this bloody fuss over a flower bed?" he demanded of himself, thinking of their heated conversation over the breakfast table. Why did Kitty want one anyway? It would spoil a perfectly good stretch of turf. What was it? Green velvet, Fred had called it. It could be made like that again with a little care and lawn tonic. Ruefully he told himself that he must be getting like, what was his name? Musgrave. Old Misery Musgrave. "Hello," said Fred Hodge, raising his bald head over the wall. "Here's that homemade jam Linda promised Kitty. Must rush, though. Sorry, no time for a chat." Alfred took the jam to the kitchen. After a few appropriate words praising Linda's generosity, Kitty said, "Alfred, are you going to dig me that bed this morning?" Alfred looked at her keenly. They rarely fell out, and he hated any discord between them. and he had known her long enough to sense that this thing went deeper than the words that they'd exchanged. It was bloody well getting out of proportion. Why let a thing like a flower bed, of all things, come between them? Kitty stood waiting. "Right, you win," he said. "I'll start right away." He felt better as he took his spade from the tool shed and went to the spot where Kitty had marked out the bed with sticks. He stood ready to drive the spade into the ground, thinking over what he was about to do. He was going to cut the sacred turf that old Musgrave had lavished years of love on. He knew he'd be ruining a perfectly good lawn, but at least it would please Kitty. Poor old Musgrave. He put his foot on the shoulder of the spade and pushed it down. Immediately he experienced a sick, giddy feeling, as though his vitality was draining away like water out of a bathtub. Something like a frightened bird fluttered in his chest. Bloody hell. This couldn't be it, could it? The dreaded, secretly awaited heart attack. Somewhere it seemed a voice was crying, "Stop! Stop! Stop!" He was vaguely conscious of someone behind him. Someone just behind him. He turned, slowly, but nothing. Nobody. Just sunlight on the lawn, a quiver in the air. He leaned on the spade until his breathing became regular again. No, not his heart this time. Not yet. In the kitchen he said lamely, I felt a bit faint, bending over those blasted weeds. I think I'll just lie down for a bit, I'll do the bed tomorrow. But he knew he lied. Alfred Parsons stood up suddenly and turned quickly. But there was nothing there. There never was. But he could have sworn he'd not been alone. He knelt down again and continued filling a flower pot. He was jumpy. That was it. He was jumpy because of this stupid difference with Kitty. Then he went inside for his mid-morning cup of tea, which she handed to him, coldly. "You promised," she began. I know, the bloody bed." "Well, no need to talk that way. Might have been all right at Proctor's, but listen, Kitty. Look, I can't explain it, but I cannot dig up that lawn. Look, please, just forget about it." She gave a mirthless giggle. "Alfred Parsons, you and I have been together for a long time, and now you refuse me over something that means a lot to me. Perhaps I'm getting old and you can't be bothered anymore. Or perhaps you're starting to go gaga. But I think it's terrible you're willing to fall out with me over such a little thing." "Oh, all right!" Alfred shouted. "All right!" He left the room, and with sudden desperate determination seized the spade and strode back to the lawn, where he drove the blade deep into the turf, again and again. "Stop! Stop! Stop!" screamed a voice through his brain. Damn Musgrave! He wouldn't look round. In with the spade again, turning over the clod. No, there was nobody behind him. He would not turn round. Then he hurled down the spade and stumbled away. "I'm going to post office," he called to Kitty through the kitchen window. "All right," she said with a choke in her voice. "I'll have to do it myself." "Kitty, don't go on that lawn," he called. But it was too late. She had gone to get her gardening things. Filled with resentment, Alfred Parsons marched out of his gate in the direction of the High Street. Oh, let her dig the bloody bed if she was so keen. And drinking the Swan was what he needed. Later, he met Fred Hodge waiting for Linda outside the supermarket. "Hello, Alf. Something up?" he asked in a way that reminded Alfred of the caricature face looking over a wall, exclaiming, "What? No cheer?" No. In a bit of a hurry to get home. Look, I'll see you tonight." He walked away briskly, but he felt better for having met his neighbour. Later he would chat to him over the garden wall, and by then everything would be normal. He'd make it up with Kitty, help her with the flower bed, and to hell with all these queer feelings. Stress. That's what it was. Being given the heave-ho after 35 years' loyal service. It'd stress anybody. And stress made your imagination play funny tricks. He hurried home. When he was inside the gate, his eyes sought the spot where the flower bed was to be. There, in her check dress and gardening gloves, was Kitty. She was lying still on the lawn, the spade close by. Alfred could see where she'd begun to dig. He knew before he reached her that she was dead, and in a vague way he knew why. As he knelt over her, he was aware of the presence of someone else in the garden. Now it seemed to be all around him, yet he knew it was the same presence that earlier he'd felt behind him. Old Misery Musgrave.